Oscars are upon us. It's time to pick the best movie that came out in 2024. So here's my ranking of all 10 Best Picture nominees. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. And while I'm a movie fan at heart, I also am a certified critic on Rotten Tomatoes and a voting member of Critics' Choice. If you want to join the conversation today, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the Best Picture nominees that you've seen. Now, this is always an interesting ranking because, by definition, every movie on this list was selected by a very large voting base to be some of the best movies of this year, or they consider them the 10 best movies of the year. And so even the number 10 movie is a highly celebrated film that a bunch of people out there think is the best film that came out in 2024. But art is subjective. The inherent nature of it is it's supposed to provoke many different emotions. It's supposed to be thought-provoking. And so a movie that will draw out the biggest and best emotions from one person will step on another person's toes. So these ones always get a little bit interesting, but with all of that said, let's get started. In last place, Emilia Perez. Now, this movie has turned into the lightning rod for scandals when it comes to this award season. And that started with just people's opinions on the film, and then it kind of turned into all sorts of stuff about behavior on the internet and in interviews. So when you put this one in last, you really do have to put some clarifiers on it as to exactly what you mean, because you can find no shortage of think pieces on how this is the worst Best Picture nominee of all time, how it's overrated, how it's a complete disaster. And so when I put it in last, I don't think it's any of those things. I found it to be an interesting movie that did a bunch of things I've never seen before. It held my attention, but also I don't think that this particular experiment and combination of plot points and genres fully worked for me. On the positive, I went into it not really knowing what it was at all. All I'd seen was the word drug cartel. That was it. And Zoe Saldana. That's all I knew going into the movie. And so she starts walking down the street and her arms start kind of moving a little bit rhythmically. She starts talking on the beat and it breaks into song. That's how I discovered it was a musical, watching the film. And simply the way that it incorporates the musical numbers into the film, the way that it does the choreography, the way that it sometimes kind of goes into these surrealist sort of dreamlike sequences and transitions back into a dramatic scene. I haven't seen a musical do something like that before, so I found it just kind of interesting to watch and was fascinated by the techniques used in the film. But when you start getting into the plot elements, the character works, the themes, there were a lot of issues. Like there's something in there that you go, okay, I see what you're going for, but it just doesn't really work, and I don't think that this was the plot mechanism to tell this type of story, where you have this cartel boss with a lifelong of regret, wanting to have a redemptive journey and using kind of the transition as a mechanism for life change. There's a lot of issues with what is communicated in that, the way that that's handled. In particular, where you have a character that's this violent, dangerous, awful person and becomes altruistic. There's a lot of concerns in what's kind of being done with that. And then kind of having this Mrs. Doubtfire-esque plot line with reconnecting with the kids. Just a very strange story that has some messaging in there that you go, what on earth are you trying to say? And is this actually representative of how these groups perceive of themselves? Like, there's a lot of things in there that had many issues with the story, the execution of it, the plot points, how it comes together. And this is even before we start getting into scandals, representation of cultures, people's Spanish, all of this different stuff. Number 9, Conclave. This is a film where I was constantly impressed by the talent on display, but I never felt like I connected with it on a story level, where it's a movie filled with amazing, nuanced performances, subtle details, wonderfully shot in these gorgeous cathedrals, and so much imagery that's interesting to look at. and framed to perfection. But at the center of it, this religious political thriller about conspiracies and how everyone has a scandal, everyone has an agenda, and we're trying to unpack it and get to the bottom of everything. I just never felt like I was intrigued by any of it. I never felt sucked into the mystery. I wasn't invested enough in any of it. And so perhaps that's going in expecting something different from what I got, or people overhyping elements of it, of just, it's so captivating and you'll be mesmerized. And that just wasn't my experience watching this film. Some of it also might be, I'm not Catholic, but I am very much Christian, and a story about how everyone in authority is almost everyone in authority with power is corrupted by that power, and they have their agendas for their own selfish gain. Like, those are stories that we get a lot of them out of Hollywood, and a lot of them towards religious organizations. And not that, of course, there are many, many, many issues that come with power and religious structures and scandals. I understand, but also, when you have a story like this that is making the point everyone's corrupt except the humble person over there, I also don't know that I fully believe that about it either. When it's like the message is so very clear that everyone was corrupted by power, and so I that's a theme, and that I hear it and I push back and I go, I've known a lot of people that were high up and they were the wonderful, wonderful people. They were not corrupt as you claim. So even some of those things that what it dives into, I just had issues with its perception of religious organizations. Number 8, Nickel Boys, an absolutely gut-wrenching film inspired by a real school that was open in Florida until 2011. And it's a movie that from the very beginning kind of sucks you into this world and just takes you on this devastating journey for this optimistic boy with all the potential in the world, doors starting to be open for him, and then is unjustly taken off to this just crushing, abusive school. And as you kind of follow on this journey of friendship in there, different worldviews and perspectives, their attempts to continue to live their lives to the fullest, to escape, to get beyond everything, the hopelessness of just these utterly corrupt systems and people in power. There's a lot in there that is just very, just causes you to reflect on man's inhumanity to man, and that this isn't the distant past, this is the recent past, and things that we're still processing through. All that said, it's also told in a fashion that is so stark, it's so bleak, because it's designed to be so immersive with this point of view camera where you're right there, and there's minimalist music. And in doing so, it makes for a incredibly difficult viewing experience. That it's both the storytelling mechanism has its moments where it's very effective, and then at a certain point in time, because it's such a story stylized technique, you're very aware of it moving forward. And in particular, when you're in these settings that are so torturous for the characters and you're in their perspective, it's a very difficult viewing experience as a desired effect, as well as a storytelling technique. You're just paying too much attention to the storytelling itself. And when you kind of do all of this and have a story like this, it got to a point in time where I was like, okay, this is kind of like depressing Shawshank Redemption, except because it's being told in this fashion, because it's so bleak, it felt like the hope was sucked out of it for me. And you're just kind of left with the depressing side to it. And that was something about the film that, I don't know, perhaps rightfully so, it left an incredibly bad taste in my mouth. Next up, A Complete Unknown, the latest film from James Mangold, a director I am very fond of. Just a few years back, Ford vs. Ferrari was one of my absolute favorite films of that year, but he's made many movies across the decades that I have absolutely loved, and he's made many movies of such different genres with such different tones, and that's one thing I love about his filmography. And here he returned to familiar territory with a musical biopic about the life of Bob Dylan, specifically this window of time at the beginning of his career where he took the world of folk and kind of turned it on its head. And what this movie does best is put you in a time and a place, something that I'd never spent much time thinking about the world of folk and Bob Dylan's influence on it and the way that he both popularized a genre, but also kind of took it away from the people who had held on to it for such a long time. And so it's an exploration of fandoms of sorts, that this is not specific to the world of folk, that there's these people have come along in terms of comic books and Star Trek and all these different things that had become these kind of niche fandoms, these people protecting the purity of the thing that they love. And at some point in time, it goes mainstream and someone takes it and gives it to everyone else and creates a version of it that is combined with pop culture. And all of a sudden, it's kind of taken away from the group and given to everyone. And those sorts of stories are always kind of interesting to me, as even the world that I'm in of talking about movies, in particular comic book movies, there's a point in time where that was taken away from the nerds and given to the masses through movies, was the mechanism by which that happened. And this is a look at what Bob Dylan did to music and how his career was launched by him being embraced, the old generation embracing him into their community and giving him a platform and resources, all this stuff that allowed him to gain an audience. And then he took the pure version of their music and merged it with rock and took that thing from them in a lot of ways and corrupted their thing. And in doing so, created some of the most celebrated music of all time, some of those influential music of all time. And so that's the stuff in this movie that I just thought was really, really cool. The other side to it that I found consistently frustrating, though, was Bob Dylan himself. And I think that this is part of the problem with Bob Dylan making a movie about him, is he's such a weird, mysterious guy that you go into the movie with these questions about what makes this guy tick. And then the movie's answers are, well, you'll never know. Like, you never kind of feel like you unpack him. You never felt like I got that revelation of, like, why is he so contrarian, and why does he always buck the system, have to fight? It never really unpacks it. It's just like, yeah, that's Bob Dylan. That's the way that he is. And so I always felt the movie kept me a little bit at arm's length. And also at times, I think it because it's exploring so much about his life, his love life, music, transition, it's covering a lot of ground, and so it can kind of feel like it's shifting between a few too many things at times. So I didn't fully love it, but there's a lot in here that I did love. Number 6, I'm Still Here. Another gut-wrenching, absolutely devastating story, except this time it is directly about real life events, something that happened to an actual person, an actual family in Brazil. And while it does take a little while to get going, it does so you understand that this is a happy family. They're so clearly not the bad guys. There's nothing suspicious, shady about them. They're just people that care about other people. And they exist in a nation with an utterly corrupt government that has totalitarian power and no accountability to anyone. And the story's told from the perspective of this family. And so all we really kind of see of these events, of what's going on with the politics, is what the family sees, and in particular what the mother in this family sees and observes and hears as she watches the news, as she asks people questions, as she's arrested, interrogated, tortured. We just see it from her perspective. And there's this utter sense of hopelessness on the entire journey of just getting basic information at points in time where just the difficulty of, one of the things just absolutely stuck out to me is she doesn't know what's happening with her husband, does not know anything, cannot get any information. And she also can't access her money without his signature. And like it does it with a death certificate, then it goes to her, and there's all these things that could happen if she had an answer and can't get anything. And you're just like stuck in a system where there's nowhere to turn, true hopelessness. And despite some, this is, everyone knows what's kind of going on. It's out in the public. There's the news is kind of discussing some of these things. Nothing. Because the people in power have all the power, all the might. You're just kind of stuck in this situation. And like, once again, this is a story that is not the distant past. It's the recent past. And elements of it are barely the past. As you get into the epilogue and you learn about some of what's kind of happened in the aftermath of everything, it's within my lifetime. And there's things where there's still lack of justice. You're still going, what on earth? How can we be so cruel to one another? Very engaging story, very interesting. I don't know that I felt that there were 2 hours and 15 minutes of story to be told. I just don't know that the movie needed this runtime. And in particular, the beginning and the multiple epilogues, I think could have been tighter. Like, I didn't need as much there. I got the point. They're a happy family and got the point of the epilogues. But very, like, in particular in the middle of the film, just really powerful stuff. Number 5, The Brutalist. This is a film I went into knowing almost nothing about it. I did not know what The Brutalist meant. I just saw this picture of Adrian Brody smoking with sparks around him and that the film was long. And what I got was this kind of sweeping, epic story of an immigrant's experience. And it's the kind of movie that when you just dive a little bit into the making of it, the budget, you just kind of go, I don't understand Hollywood. I don't understand the world of movies right now, because the reported budget on this film is $9.6 million. And you look at the scope and the size of this film. And when I say that, I mean how much time it covers, the environments they're in, the sets that they're in, the number of places that they go. It's a movie that is very big in its storytelling and all the environments that need to be created for the film or visited in the film. And then not just the size of the story, but the scope of the imagery. It's a film just filled with gorgeous, massive shots that look and feel cinematic, just true cinema of just shots. Like I said, the poster shot of him just smoking in front of a fire with sparks spraying. It's this gorgeous shot that you can just go, yeah, let's snap that. That's our poster right there. And the whole movie is filled with this type of imagery that just captures, when you think cinema, that's what this movie is. Reported budget, under $10 million. Gorgeous imagery, large-scale storytelling that's a period piece, covering a lot of locations, a lot of sets, sometimes very busy sets, under $10 million. And quite a few familiar actors in the film. Not necessarily current A-listers, but many very familiar actors that aren't dirt cheap to cast for your movie. Under $10 million. Like that, I see that and I go, where's all the money going? What is everyone else doing? Why do you need so much money to make so many movies and TV shows that look so incredibly bland? Look what this movie just did, $9.6 million. Anyway, like you dive into the story, and it's a movie that is so dense and covers so much, and not specifically even in the sense of being a like highly intricate plot with all these moving parts that a bunch of things happen. In a certain sense, it's very straightforward and simple, our journey of kind of just trying to build this one building. But everything is layered and nuanced of the complexity of just immigrating at the point in time in the context where he immigrated, that it was just him for a while and he knew nothing of his family, and the difficulty of bringing them over, the difficulty of finding work despite having an incredible skill set, the addictions that come along with that. But while it has just it'll incorporate the triumph of, we did it, I was able to make it, we're going to America. It has the triumph of that, followed immediately by the tragedy of it, followed immediately by the opportunity, followed immediately by the consequences. And it keeps having so much life, like real life to it, that you have many experiences, you have many emotions, you have many victories, you have many setbacks. And that's the journey of this film, that it's a true sweeping epic covering the life in all the little details for this brutalist. Of course, you also get some great performances in here. You know, Adrian Brody is one of these guys that seems like he disappears a lot, and then out of nowhere he shows up and delivers like an Oscar-worthy performance. He goes, "Oh yeah, this guy's one of the greats." Like, why does he keep disappearing? Why doesn't? What's the deal with that? But the one that stuck out to me was Guy Pearce, who I've seen him in so many different things over the last 30 years, and just kind of transforms into this character that he's doing an accent, but just like everything about his posture, everything is different and believable. And you buy into it. It's just like, I mean, like, wow, that's the transformation here is very cool. So I will say this, it's the kind of movie that has so much talent on display, telling this sweeping story, the specific subject matter about building a building, to the point of view, he's a brutalist engineer, that isn't the thing that is of most interest to me. It's like, let's make a very compelling story out of something that isn't immediately all that interesting. Sometimes I look at some of these prestige films, and that's kind of what they feel like to me, of like, what if all this talent was attached to something that was a little bit more overtly captivating in and of itself, besides designing a building. Number 4, Anora. I saw this one back at Fantastic Fest in September while it was still doing the film festival circuit, and went in knowing very little about the film besides the lead actress has this amazing breakout performance and that it was getting a good bit of buzz, and I think I'd heard the phrase sex workers. But that was kind of all I knew about the film. I didn't know the tone, the vibe. I did not know the ride that I was in for when I sat down in my seat. And so for the first 40 minutes of the movie, I was a little bit confused, like, well, sounds like a bunch of people on film Twitter and in the film festival circuit are just really thirsty people that really are into sex-crazed films, that are into two fools living in their debauchery for a few weeks. And then everything kind of turns on its head, and the tone, the filmmaking techniques, the performance, everything shifts in kind of essentially one scene in the movie. And there was a moment where I was watching it where a guy on a phone says some line, and it was like really funny. And up till that point in time, the movie hadn't really been funny. Not that it was devoid of levity or jokes, but like this guy says this one line, it was like really funny. I was like, oh, I guess this movie's gonna have a little humor in it. And then it goes into full-blown chaos mode for the rest of the film. And that one joke turned out to be what the whole rest of the movie was. And it's a film that you don't really understand the movie that you're watching until you get to the end of it. Until everything's fully revealed, you start to realize what this journey, even the nature of the filmmaking techniques has been truly about. Where the first 40 minutes is designed to be a fantasy of a dream of what life could be for this girl of sorts. And being swept up on this rich guy's adventure, going to Las Vegas, throwing money around, just living the life, sex and drugs, all of that. Just nonstop partying, fun with someone that you're having fun with. And then it kind of transitions into the reality of this person's life. And so it's shot for 40 minutes like we're doing commercials for this lifestyle. Very glamorized. And then it very kind of suddenly, but also organically turns into reality as her dream, that bubble is burst. And you go, oh, this is his life. This is the chaos. This is the toxicity. This is who he really is. And even to the level that you don't realize how much the story is about her. And your expectations of who is playing who is taking advantage of who is treating this just as a transaction versus who is actually connecting with the other person, who's taking advantage of who. You kind of play it in your mind one way based off of the original dynamics of these two characters and what that means and implies. And by the time you get to the very end of it, it turns into this poignant, very sad story that wasn't the movie that you really kind of thought that you were watching at the beginning. It's turned into something different that is, in many ways, causes you to think, reevaluate things, while also being wildly entertaining along the way. Real quick, while I'm talking, remember to join me down below in the comment section. Let me hear your ranking of the Best Picture nominees. And as I mentioned at the beginning, when we go into this, these are the movies that were potent enough that a very large voting group thought these are the 10 best movies of the year. And when movies cut through and are profound enough, that's where you get good discussions. And a movie that maybe didn't resonate with me really resonated with you, or it really rubbed you the wrong way and I really connected with it. That's kind of when you have really good lively discussions, because art is supposed to connect with people. When it connects with you and not me, we can have very interesting discussions about that can get a little bit lively. Let's just be respectful about all of it. Also, if you want to check out not just my ranking of the Best Picture nominees, but what were my personal favorite movies of last year, here is my list, and you can watch that right afterwards. In third place, The Substance. Now, this movie came out while I was at Fantastic Fest last year, and so I was about a week late to seeing it, but I was at a film festival with a bunch of people that love to talk about movies and love movies. And in particular, I was in a group of people that were a lot of horror TikTokers. So The Substance was the movie that everyone in their corner of the internet was talking about. And we were at this film festival. So everyone in our group kept taking turns leaving the film festival where we were watching movies to go watch The Substance. We stopped watching movies to go watch a movie, and everyone was just raving about this film. So, I was attending the festival with Cody Leach. One day, we were like, there's nothing at the film festival we need to watch this morning. So we left the film festival to go watch The Substance. And both me and Cody, as well as almost everyone there we were talking with, basically said, had this movie played at Fantastic Fest, probably would have been our favorite movie, or one of our absolute favorite movies of the film festival. And it's the type of movie that also would play really well at Fantastic Fest, that likes really weird, wild, crazy, wacky movies. What was it about this movie that just cut through, popped so much that the horror genre is not typically nominated for Best Picture? I think in the history there's like 8 horror movies that have been nominated for Best Picture. So what was it about this film? And I'll say this, even leaving the theater, I wasn't nearly as positive on the film as I was 2-3 months later when it came to December. And I was thinking back on what are the movies that were the best this year? And I think that's what's so great about The Substance. It kind of takes this sci-fi concept of a substance that creates a second you of sorts. That is you, but you have to trade back and forth how much you live between young, perfect you and you. And it uses this as this amazing exploration and metaphor for self-love, self-acceptance, unrealistic beauty standards, and so much more. And so just superficially watching it, it was like, it was engaging, it was interesting. It was like, maybe it got a little bit too wild at the end, but yeah, that was really cool. And it's a movie that never left my brain. Of all the movies last year, it's the one that just kind of stuck with me. And I kept just thinking about it and processing through the concepts of it, of a person with one mind, one being, going back and forth between two bodies, and how when you're in each body, how you would perceive of that other body as a different person, though it's just you. I just was like captivated by this concept, and such an interesting mechanism to explore one's self-acceptance and self-love and letting go and everything like that, and having a competitiveness with yourself. It creates such an extreme version of it, but it's also something we kind of, in another sense, actually kind of do in our thinking and processing of life and the different ways that we look at our past, our future, our choices. There's such a smart script that stuck with me, and just individual scenes, like the one where she's trying to go on a date with a guy, and to the audience, everyone in the audience knows that she is so far, she is out of his league in every category, that she's like exponentially better looking, more successful, more famous, everything. And the guy is just in love with her and just accepts her and is completely enamored with her, and her crippling insecurity of having to be perfect crushes it. Like, she's actually excited for it. Someone that just wants to be with her, and she can't go. And it's just such a profound moment of like even the little ways, like it's an extreme example, but so relatable. It's a story that everything that happens in it is elevated and detached from my day-to-day experience, and designed to be very surreal, and with these distorted lenses and the color schemes and everything. And at the same time, it's so human and so relatable. Not this specific thing, but understanding of humanity. And I think that's what this movie does so well, of finding a way to connect while telling this fantastical story. And it explores so much, so seamlessly. And so it's like with every passing day, it's a movie that I've liked and respected more. And I hope To Me More wins. Our runner-up, Wicked. Now, this is a film that I was not really excited for at all. A ton of people had it as their most anticipated going into the year. Whenever they announced it and started dropping first teasers and trailers, people were like, Sean, why didn't you cover this? Why aren't you talking about this? Are you excited for this? Like, no, I am not. My wife and daughter are, and they've got all the shirts, and they went to go see the touring Broadway show here in Austin, and that was like a big thing for them earlier last year. And so the girls in my house were very excited about Wicked, but I'd heard the song the place I heard the song Defying Gravity for the first time was watching the TV show Glee. That was like my experience with Wicked. I knew the basic concept, and I'd heard some of the other, like I think I could recognize Popular, and I could say that's from Wicked, but I couldn't have told you anything specific about Wicked other than the one paragraph synopsis of it. I just didn't really care. It's not my thing. That was my context going into the film. And there's actually a civil war in my house because I couldn't take multiple people to the press screening, so I was going to take my wife, and my daughter was actually actively angry about this. And it's like, Mom, that was supposed to be a mom-daughter. We were going to go see it to get together. You can't go see it with Dad. So last minute got to take my sister, who absolutely loved that she got that opportunity to see it early. Why do I say all of that? Because I went in essentially with a bias against this film, and the movie itself won me over. It's not my genre. It's not my thing. The subject matter is not of interest to me. But it was done so well that, of course, I was immersed in this world. And from almost the opening shots of the film, it just makes Oz feel like such a big, lively, lived-in place where everything's shot to be kind of huge and gigantic. And we show up and we're on a massive set with a ton of extras and every detail, every color picked, selected all along the way. Each costume feels so lively. And you get into these musical numbers, in particular one in a library where there's like spinning bookshelves, 50 extras, and these long, wide shots. Everything feels so big and so choreographed and so intentional that I just immediately felt drawn into this world. And like, this is the most immersive a fantasy world, a fantasy place has felt to me since Harry Potter and Hogwarts, where I'm going there. I'm learning at this place. And once you kind of get beyond that, I mean, of course, the musicals, the songs are great. The dance numbers are wonderful. But the characters, you get swept up into the world. And like all of a sudden it made sense to me, like why my wife was so obsessed with this thing and talking about these characters and like, why does she dress up as her for Halloween? What's going on here? Because they're really well drawn out characters with interesting dynamics at the school. And then even beyond that, there's explorations about the abuses of power in the world of Oz and corruption, conspiracy. Like there's so many more layers to it than I was expecting, and it worked. And it's a film that builds to such a great crescendo at the end of the film that while this is only half of the story, if this was the whole story, it doesn't feel incomplete because you're telling the story of this person accepting themselves and figuring out who they are and standing up, stop being bullied around by everyone around her. And it ends on that crescendo, that high note that I just thought was so powerful that even as someone who's like, I don't want to watch this, was one of my favorite movies of last year. But coming in at number 1, Dune Part 2. For me, this is the fact that Denis was not nominated for Best Director is absolutely insane to me, because when I look at what film last year was incredibly ambitious, that pulled together an incredibly large set of difficult techniques that have to work seamlessly for this movie to work, Dune Part 2 is the movie that comes to mind, where someone aimed high, doing something incredibly difficult, and nailed everything. Every single frame in this sci-fi epic film is utterly believable. Every costume is something that seems like it would really exist. Every VFX is believable. You buy into it. Not a single frame rings false. All of it works. And it's adapting a book that was for a long time viewed as not something that was too dense, is too weird to be able to adapt. And he pulled it off. And he made it something that is complex. The exploration of the hero's journey. It's both delivers the hero's journey while subverting the hero's journey and flipping on its head. It has all the big moments of victory and triumph, while also having a second layer to each one of those, as this was all a manipulation. And Paul both embraces the manipulation as well as delivers it. Like it's so layered on every level. And so you're thrilled by the victory, but also you're horrified by its implications. That to me is when you've made a movie that is on this other level, that they aimed high and nailed it. And that Denis didn't get nominated with the role of the director. You're the guy that's supposed to be responsible for all the categories to make them awesome, excellent, and pull them together seamlessly into this organic thing that feels natural and cohesive. And he did the biggest one, and it worked on every single level. Performances, the look, aesthetics, emotions, music, everything works, and he wasn't even nominated. That is insane to me, because he's the clear person that should be winning, and he wasn't nominated. Bonkers to me that that's the case. But I was a very big fan of the first Dune, but I said at the end of it, if we don't get part 2, that kind of knocks this movie back a little bit because it's an incomplete story. But if part 2 comes out and it delivers and it's good, this one gets bumped up maybe a couple spots because it's such a great setup. And Dune Part 2 is such a great payoff to everything that came before. And so as someone that loves these types of movies, loves heroes' journeys, and loves sci-fi epics, and this is one that takes all of it and delivers what I want from one of these films, while also flipping it on its head with the true nefarious nature of Paul Atreides, and it works, and it's so satisfying. So for me, it comes in at number 1. Be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Let me know your ranking of the Best Picture nominees. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Oh, and check out my top 10 right over there.